There is a moment with certain machines when you forget they are machines. Not because you have been fooled. You know exactly what you are looking at. You can see the metal. Somebody told you on the way in that there is nothing alive in the room. And then the thing turns its head and looks, and something old and automatic at the back of your skull throws a switch that says, "That is a living creature," and it has just noticed you. You cannot switch it back off by knowing better. People have stood in front of this one particular object for 250 years, knowing better and feeling watched anyway. It was built in London around 1773 in a workshop full of jewels and gears by a man who spent his whole life making metal do things metal should not be able to do. This time he made a bird, life-sized, standing in silver, on a little river made of glass. Wind it up, and music starts, and the water begins to move, and the bird comes alive for less than a minute, and then it stops. It is called the Silver Swan. It does not live in a cathedral or a palace. It lives in a museum in the north of England, in a quiet town called Barnard Castle, and it is the most famous thing for miles in any direction. Once a day at 2 p.m, somebody walks over and winds it up. Here is what happens when they do. The music begins, thin and bright. The sound a music box makes. Underneath the swan, dozens of twisted glass rods start to turn, and the light sliding along them breaks into ripples, so the bird seems to be sitting on moving water. The swan lifts its head. It turns slowly to one side and then the other, the way a real swan checks the bank before it settles. It bends its long neck back over its own body and preens, dipping down into its feathers. Then it goes still for a beat. And in the water below, a single silver fish is swimming. The swan sees it. The neck comes down in one smooth curve, the head slips beneath the surface, and the beak closes. It lifts. The throat works. The fish is gone. And then the music ends, and the bird is an ornament again. Now hold on to what you actually just watched. The water is glass. The feathers are silver. The fish is silver. The river is a row of spinning rods. The hunger is a spring. And the swallow is a line of gears turning over in the same fixed order they have turned in 100,000 times. There is nothing in there that wants anything. There is no animal. There is not even a picture of an animal. There is a cabinet of clockwork built in the shape of a bird, and every single person who watches it, including the ones who have spent their careers taking it apart, comes away with the same useless and undeniable feeling that for half a minute the thing was alive. That is the part worth stopping on. Not how the gears move. We know how the gears move. The question is why dead metal moving correctly reads to you as a living soul. Start with the machine, because the machine alone is staggering. There is not one clockwork inside the swan. There are 3, running at once, each minding its own task. One drives the music. One turns the field of glass rods that fakes the water. The third runs the part that matters, the head, the neck, and the fish. The neck is the trick inside the trick. It is not a solid tube. It is a long chain of separate silver rings, more than 100 of them, each one hinged to the next, so the whole neck can flex and twist and dip in a single liquid line instead of a stiff mechanical bend. By some accounts, there are more than 2,000 moving parts in the thing, but the parts are not really the point. You can know the exact count and still flinch when it looks at you, because what Merlin built was never just a swan. It was a list of the small movements that make a brain say alive, and he got every one of them right. The pause before it turns, the way it looks before it acts, the unhurried preen, the deliberate swallow. The life was never in the silver. He hid it in you. The man who knew that list was named John Joseph Merlin. He was born in 1735 in a small town in what is now Belgium, and he arrived in London in his 20s in the entourage of an ambassador, and more or less never left. London called him the ingenious mechanic, and it meant the word as a kind of awe. He built instruments nobody had asked for and nobody had imagined. harpsichords crossed with pianos, a piano crossed with an organ, clocks that claimed they would run forever. He became the principal mechanic at Cox's Museum, a hall of mechanical wonders. And that is where the swan came from, his hands, and James Cox's silver. Later, he opened a museum of his own, full of the things he had dreamed up. He was, by every account, the most inventive man in the city. He may also have been the most dangerous to stand next to at a party, because Merlin invented other things. One of them was a pair of skates with wheels fixed to the bottom, the ancestor of every roller skate that has ever rolled since, and he could not resist showing them off. There was a famous masquerade at a grand house in Soho, and Merlin came gliding in wearing his new wheels and playing a violin as he went. The one thing he had not got around to inventing was a way to stop. An account written at the time says he crossed the floor at speed, could not slow down, could not steer, and went straight into an enormous mirror worth more than £500, shattered it, broke the violin, and hurt himself badly. Hold those two facts side by side for a second. The same man who could give a machine perfect, gentle, controlled movement could not, on his own 2 feet, work out how to turn left. To understand why a metal bird could become this famous, you have to picture the world it was born into. The 1700s were mad for automata. All across Europe, clockmakers were building mechanical people and animals that could write and draw and play real instruments and appear to breathe. Kings collected them, crowds paid to see them. It was the closest that century could come to artificial life, and it sat right on the line between a marvelous toy and a quiet kind of blasphemy. The swan first lived in exactly that sort of place, Cox's Museum in London, a room crammed with jeweled, glittering, moving machines, where you paid at the door to walk among mechanical creatures that seemed to be alive. Most of those wonders are long gone now, broken up, sold for parts, lost. The swan is one of the very few that survived. For a machine, it has had a remarkably public life. In the summer of 1867, the swan was sent to Paris, to the Great World's Fair, in a city already drowning in marvels, electric light and engines and the future all arriving at once. The swan still stopped people cold. Among the crowds that year was a young American writer, not yet famous, and deeply unimpressed by most of what Europe kept ordering him to admire. His name was Mark Twain. He watched the swan, and afterwards he wrote this down. I watched the Silver Swan, which had a living grace about his movement and a living intelligence in his eyes, watched him swimming about as comfortably and unconcernedly as if he had been born in a morass instead of a jeweller's shop, watched him seize a silver fish from under the water and hold up his head and go through the customary and elaborate motions of swallowing it, a living intelligence in his eyes. Twain knew there was nothing behind them. He wrote it that way anyway because that is what his eyes reported back to him, and he was too honest to call them liars. 5 years later, in 1872, the swan found the home it still has. A wealthy and slightly unusual couple, John Bowes and his French wife Josephine, were quietly putting together one of the strangest private collections in Britain and building an enormous French-style museum to hold it out in the County Durham countryside, miles from anywhere you would expect to find one. They bought the swan from a Paris jeweller for £200. Neither of them lived to see the doors open. The museum finally did open in 1892, a vast ornate palace standing over a small market town as if it had landed there by mistake. And the swan, the mechanical bird from Cox's Hall of Wonders, became its heart. To this day, it is the museum's emblem. The logo is a swan, and it still works, which, when you actually stop and count the years, is hard to take in. It was built before there were trains, before there were photographs, before anyone alive today had a grandparent who had a grandparent. It has crossed out of one world and into a completely different one, and it still does the one thing it was ever made to do. It has been taken apart and nursed back to health more than once, The last great restoration ran to something like 1,500 hours of work, clockmakers bent over its rings and springs, coaxing it back. And now, once a day, at 2 o'clock, someone winds it, and a small crowd gathers, lifts their phones, and goes quiet. The music starts. The glass water begins to move. The bird raises its head and looks around the room. And the room, every single time, holds its breath. It has no heart. It has never once been hungry. The eyes do not see the fish, and there is no fish anyway, only silver bent into the shape of one. For 250 years it has been performing a meal it cannot taste, to satisfy a hunger it does not have, and still we lean in. Still some animal part of us insists that something in there is alive and aware, and briefly, deliberately, choosing. So maybe the real machine in the room was never the swan. Maybe it was always the thing watching it, that soft old instrument behind your eyes that cannot help but find a soul wherever it is shown the signs of one. The swan only gives it the signs. You supply the soul.